Yeah, have you seen Making a Murderer?
Yeah,
that's
it was the nationwide sensation here a few weeks ago, right?
Yeah, it was awesome.
Have you seen it, Dan?
I have not.
Oh my gosh,
I've read a lot about it.
It's great. If you want to waste 10 hours,
and then still come away going like, "But did he really do it?"
and then still not know what happened.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
See, I don't know. I'm on the side where it seemed like there was way too much evidence.
Play Whiskey Wednesday, Round 11, the memory game. Until June 26, each week you can win one of our 12 incredible grand prizes. Select 2 doors at checkout, and if they match on drawing night, you'll win that bottle. Not a match? No worries. You still score a Weller 12-year. Every $5 ticket gives you 5 chances to win, including 4 weekly bonus prizes. Get your tickets now at give270.org. Charitable Gaming License ORG 0002703.
From their bar to yours, Chad and Sarah of the popular YouTube channel It's Bourbon Night bring you their favorite at-home old-fashioned mix with the new Elemental Elixir's Golden Hour Syrup. It's a custom-made syrup with notes of bold black tea, warm spices, and orange zest. All you need is your favorite whiskey and ice. No bitters needed. One bottle makes 16 drinks, so that's only $1 a cocktail before you add your own whiskey. They can also be enjoyed in other cocktails or spirits, mocktails, coffee, tea, and anything you can think of. It's crafted locally in Lexington, Kentucky, and you can get your bottle now at whiskeyambitions.com. Always find what you love at Total Wine & More. With so many great bottles to choose from at the lowest price, it's easy to find your favorite Cabernet or a new single-barrel bourbon to try with some help from one of their friendly guides. And with every bottle comes the confidence of knowing you just found something amazing. With the lowest prices for over 30 years, find what you love and love what you find only at Total Wine & More. Curbside pickup and delivery available in most areas. Visit TotalWine.com to learn more. Spirits not sold in Virginia and North Carolina. Drink responsibly and be 21. Do you ever pour yourself a bourbon, swirl it around, and then start struggling to come up with tasting notes? And perhaps you're also looking for a good Father's Day gift idea. Well, you can now solve both with a kit from Knows Your Bourbon. And unlike other nosing kits on the market, Knows Your Bourbon kits feature real ingredients for the most authentic aromas. You can smell real Tahitian vanilla bean instead of some synthetic aroma that's just made from chemicals. So head on over to knowsyourbourbon.com and enter code BP10 for 10% off your order. Ed Bly and Rising Tide Spirits are back again with a new release of Old Stubborn Bourbon. And this release of Old Stubborn is a premium hand marriage of 10, 11, and 12-year cask strength, barely filtered pot still bourbon. It comes in at a staggering 123.8 proof, and the flavoring grain for this one, which the last one was wheated, but this time it's now rye. Rich, sweet, and bold with a long finish that's sure to be another eye-opener. You can order online at Sealbox or thebourbonconcierge.com, and you can even purchase in person at Revival Vintage Spirits, and even now with very few select stores in Kentucky. You can get it now while you can, but be sure to do it because it's not going to last long.
And we're back with another episode of the Bourbon Pursuit Podcast. My name is Kenny, and we're here at Maker's Mark at their corporate headquarters today, and I've got Ryan. Ryan, how's it going?
Good, man. Excited to be here. Like we talked about with Greg Davis, Maker's is one of those, your first, nice bourbon that you ever have. And it's like, in college, you see the Makers, and you're like, oh, my gosh, I need that.
You got to get some of that,
Yeah,
right?
So I'm excited to talk to Rob and hear more about the story behind it.
Absolutely. So before we kick it off, let's talk about some of the numbers that came in. So the 2015 tourism for bourbon is finally kind of came in, and the numbers are staggering. There was almost 1 million visitors that came and did the Bourbon Trail in 2015. That kind of rivals even the entire population of Louisville, which is a huge number. So the historic Bourbon Trail, which has Bullet, Wild Turkey, Four Roses, Heaven Hill, Jim Beam, Maker's Mark, Town Branch, and Woodford, had a total of around 762,000 visits, which is a 22% increase from 2014, which is pretty big. And then you got the craft tour, which experienced around 134,000 visits, which is a few other ones you may or may not heard of. You can find them out there. Barrel House, Corsair, Limestone Branch, MB Roland, New Riff, Willett, Wilderness Trail, and Old Pogue. And then, of course, Buffalo Trace isn't part of the KDA, and they've got their own numbers, which is around 145,000. And that's about an 18% increase over last year.
That's insane. And I think it's just the beginning. I think it's going to keep growing and growing as soon as, some of these distilleries downtown get finished and Louisville becomes more of a focal point. I think it's just going to get more and more.
I think so too. I think it's going to be good. I mean, it's great for our economy. Like some of the numbers say that pretty much every tourist that comes spends right around $1,000, right? So it's not a huge expensive trip per se, because doing a distillery tour is relatively cheap, right?
Yeah.
And it's pretty easy to kind of get around. You just follow some signs. It's just a lot of driving, but for the most part, it's showing that even outside of Louisville, right? It said most people that are doing the Bourbon Trail is 85% of people that were outside of Kentucky. So it really shows that bourbon tourism is really starting to pick up around here.
That's awesome. And I think it's just, like I said, just going to keep getting bigger and bigger. I think we're going to be maybe not the new Napa, but maybe Sonoma or something like that.
Not that big, right?
Yeah.
Well, cool. So let's go ahead and we'll kick it off. So today we have the COO of Maker's Mark, and we've got Rob Samuels. Rob, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So first, let's go ahead and kick it off. One of the things we always ask people that, we know that you've been around bourbon your entire life. So I guess kind of talk about your childhood growing up. Like, what was it kind of getting into the family business?
Well, in this industry, what's magical to me about it is it's not a 9-to-5. You live the industry. So lots and lots of fond memories as a youngster of both my father and my grandparents living the industry. And through the various milestones of Maker's Mark as they were nurturing their passion and my grandfather's creation. But, my earliest memories at the distillery were with my grandfather inside the distillery. And in addition to his passion for the process and the uniqueness of each step of the process that influences the taste, he always was really passionate about the people and putting the people first and treating the employees as part of the family. And that stayed with us. He also would talk a lot about the community and giving back. And since it were Kentuckians that really kept him in business for the better part of 30 years before there was any budding interest at all in his creation, Maker's Mark, outside the boundaries of Kentucky, he was always really passionate about giving back. Kentuckians kept him in business, and he was always going to do what he could to celebrate and partner with meaningful organizations here in Kentucky. Mm-hmm. And that lives on here today. It's actually one of the aspects of my role that I enjoy more than any other, is using his creation to partner, to raise the profile and resources for various causes.
So let's go ahead and kind of talk about that a little bit. So what's the day in the life of a COO of Maker's Mark here?
The good news is no 2 days are alike.
Yeah.
I spent last Friday in Chicago. The Petersons, who have provided our grain since the early 1970s, they were recognized in Chicago at a big event with 1,000 of fellow farmers from throughout the South and Midwest. And it was really an honor for me to help celebrate their contributions to the success of Maker's Mark. And I got to share the story of Maker's Mark with the group. But the heart and soul of what Maker's Mark is in Marion County. And what's really exciting to me and to our team is setting the stage for growth in a really unique, special way. We've expanded in a way I think that no distillery in the world's ever expanded, which is instead of scaling up in a way where you do bigger stills, bigger fermenters to reduce cost a little bit, we've actually built an identical replica distillery. So
let's talk about that a little bit. So kind of talk about what's going on with the new distillery and all these other kind of things that you're planning on.
Well, as a single source of supply, which means every drop that's ever been in a bottle of Maker's Mark, we made, and every drop that we've ever made in our distillery has never been anywhere other than a bottle of Maker's Mark. We're limited and restricted in ways that a lot of other distilleries aren't. So as you look into the crystal ball and you think that this is truly the beginning of what's going to be a really nice period of growth for premium bourbon, which ultimately that's my grandparents' legacy, their vision in the early 1950s to do something that a lot of people, even in the industry, thought not possible, bringing to life a handmade, refined, soft, full-flavored bourbon when the category was rough, tough, blow your ears off, is exciting in that we've built another distillery identical to the first. And the idea being that same equipment, same process equals same taste. So way into the future, that Maker's Mark will have been made exactly as it was the very first morning in 1953 when we got started.
Fantastic. So I heard that catchphrase in there. I've heard it before, blow your ears off, right? Now, where'd you hear that the first time? Because I think I've heard that at some point in my life as well.
Well, that's the industry's legacy. And, when our family got started in the early 1800s, it's hard to imagine today, but the category of American whiskey and bourbon was in a very, very different place. It was all about commodity. It was test of manhood, and the rougher and the tougher, the more successful you were. They were essentially commodities. Our family owned a distillery called T.W. Samuels, was passed down through the generations. I'll admit that whiskey was probably a little worse than most of the others. And thankfully, my grandparents had the courage to break from tradition and to go chase their dream. I think in a lot of ways, it would have been a hell of a lot easier for them just to go do what everybody in the industry expected them to do, which was to uphold the family name and make the family whiskey. But we all know when we really love and enjoy what we're a part of, we're always more successful. And he didn't start with a commercial ambition. I mean, to him, after he purchased 650 acres in Marion County, Kentucky, broke down each and every step of the process, he approached everything not as a businessman or as a commercial person, but as a craftsman. And he cash flowed everything himself. He got started, and each step of the process is unique and different to any distillery in the world with a very specific taste profile in mind. Just this idea of day after day, week after week, month after month, expenses, overhead with no revenue.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he ran the business, the operation, for almost 7 years before he sold the first case, which was actually sold to Keeneland. I think it would be interesting to look back and of all the bourbons or American whiskeys invented since 1933, when Prohibition was repealed, how many started from scratch? How many didn't borrow whiskey to get started? And to him, this was truly a commitment to his craft, his vision, and what winning looked like was really no more complicated than could he produce a handmade bourbon that he would be proud of. Proud to share with his friends, many of whom were the other distillers. At that time, he was actually living on Whiskey Row in Bardstown, so he was surrounded by the other titans of the industry. And he thought maybe one day in the nicest restaurants in the South, there would be a little bit of interest.
Oh, that's interesting. So it was funny that you said the first case was sold to Keeneland. You guys have a pretty good relationship with Keeneland, right? I mean, like every few years is a Keeneland commemorative bottle. I mean, is that the kind of tie of why you guys always have some sort of affinity with always dealing with Keeneland?
It's deeper than that. They were our first customer, and it was that community, the Thoroughbred racing community, that in the very beginning embraced Maker's Mark. Were it not for Central Kentucky and the bankers here in Louisville, Maker's Mark never would have survived. I mean, you imagine there were 7 years of him operating with no sales, and then it was an additional 25 years before there was any indication of interest beyond Kentucky. And the depth of the relationship with Keeneland, there's shared values.
Mm-hmm.
Keeneland, they're not a nonprofit, but they operate as if they were, and they love giving back, and they want to step up and be a pillar in the community. And to date, Maker's Mark and Keeneland together, we've been able to raise and donate north of $8.5 million to various causes in Kentucky.
Oh, that's fantastic. So it's very much reminding of like a starving artist, right? Of being a Picasso or being a Mozart, and then really it doesn't really matter until you're dead and gone, right? Like that's almost kind of the kind of.
Well, I can tell you, it was 1992, just as I was heading off to university, and my grandfather invited me to lunch together, and we went and had lunch at the Pendennis Club in Louisville. You know, the Pendennis Club is famous with bartenders, especially because it was a bartender at the Pendennis Club that invented the old-fashioned cocktail. And it was one of those moments that I'll just never, ever forget, because it was after we had our lunch that he sort of reflected and gazed out the window, and he talked about his creation. And in anything, when your timing's good and you have a line of customers around the block, it's easy to stay true to who you are. And, he was really proud that he never wavered from his vision when he didn't have any customers, because the market was just in a very, very different place. And he talked about that. I mean, there was a lot of well-intended pressure put on him to go conform to where the market was, which was bottom shelf commodity whiskey. And he never wavered from that. And he was really proud. Thankfully, he did get to see budding success and interest amongst top bartenders in New York and New Orleans and some of the great cities in America before he passed. What I'm proud of is we've set the stage to manage growth in a way moving forward that really keeps all of his vision intact and preserves the magic of what the Wall Street Journal said is purposeful inefficiency. We had no growth for 30 years, but for the last 30 years, we've sold every drop we've made. And the bourbon today inside the distillery is made exactly as it was the very first morning when he started. And I don't know that any other distillery in the world that's had a sustained period of growth like we have can say that. Every label's still printed and hand-torn. We still rotate every single barrel through the maturation process. I think we're the only distillery in the world that rotates barrels. And we still have by far and away the slowest, most inefficient bottling line, I have to imagine, hand-dipping every single bottle.
Right. So where do you see obviously bourbon's exploding right now. Where do you guys see the future and how Makers is going to be a part of that now? Do you see a growth here, abroad?
I see growth everywhere. I mean, premium bourbon is driving all the growth, but total volume of bourbon today is still only 70% of what it was 50 years ago in this country. So I think there's huge growth potential here in the boundaries of the U.S. and North America, and boundless growth outside the U.S. What you have with good bourbon is you don't get any other category of spirit, in my opinion. You get consumers today want taste and substance versus, I think 10, 20 years ago, vodka, bland and nondescript was associated with smooth, and that dynamic's totally changed.
So I guess even with that, when you said 20, 30 years ago, what sort of do you think really kept Maker's Mark alive during that period? I mean, was it affinity toward the brand? Was it just really struggling? Like, I mean, I know a lot of distilleries and a lot of companies are really trying to struggle during that time to try to get in the face of customers, to do more advertising, do all these other kind of things. I mean, was it just a natural progression of now where we are today and just by sheer luck that you're one of those premier brands that are out there?
Well, we had about a 30-year head start before the next big distillery attempted to make a premium position product. So we're blessed that our founders had that vision early. And some would argue, essentially invented premium bourbon. We had a long, bumpy road for the better part of 25 years. And both my grandfather and my father were deeply committed to who Makers was and is, and made the tough choices and had the discipline to stay true and wait for the mountain to come to Muhammad. And that, even carried over to how they were connecting with customers. From the outset, they knew who they were, and the goal was never to be the biggest. His philosophy, my grandfather, was to treat each customer like a friend. And when you think about things through that perspective, it's one at a time versus mass marketing, as an example. So over all of these years, the most natural way in which we have promoted, if you will, Maker's Mark is in a very personal way. So it's slow and steady versus sort of broad and mass very quickly.
Kind of like I-65 traffic, You all have some of the best advertising, that I've seen in the industry. What are some of your favorite ads that you all have had throughout the years?
Well, what's interesting is we take what we do at the distillery very seriously. At the end of the day, that's the heart and soul, and that's what defines Maker's Mark. The advertising we don't take anywhere near as seriously. The purpose of the advertising is just to get a smile from our customers. We've worked with the same agency for 45 years. I think it's the longest brand agency of any product, well beyond spirits, with an agency. We've worked together for 45 years. And, there's a lot of really, really good ones.
I'm waiting to see the blue wax over the Louisville skyline.
Yeah,
right?
instead of the red. Yeah.
Well, there was one that got people smiling here a number of years ago. That was a neck of red wax with a tuxedo bottle and said Kentucky Redneck.
Yeah, that was a good one.
This is a family business, right? And your father had a great lineage, until now. He's what, the chairman? What's his?
He's chairman emeritus. His vision for retirement. He stepped back 6 years ago, but his vision for retirement's different than most, and he's so valuable that we begged him not to run off to complete retirement. So we keep him engaged in different things. He's at the distillery hosting special tours. We pick his brain on all the big things that we do.
If you're anything like me, then you can't get enough about bourbon. And that's why I'm a subscriber to Bourbon Plus magazine. Bourbon Plus is a quarterly publication that tells the stories from the heart of bourbon, the farmers who grow the grain, the distillers who labor over the process, and the people like you and me who raise their glasses to celebrate it all. Subscribe to Bourbon Plus magazine today at bourbonplus.com, that's PLUS.com, and use code PURSUIT at checkout for $5 off your subscription. Shopify's already taken the cash register online, helping millions sell billions around the world. But did you know that Shopify can do the same thing at your retail store? Give your point-of-sale system a serious upgrade with Shopify. Shopify's point-of-sale is your command center for your retail store. From accepting payments to managing inventory, Shopify has everything you need to sell in person. And with Shopify, you get a powerhouse selling partner that effortlessly unites your in-person and online sales into one source of truth. Track every sale across your business in one place and know exactly what's in stock. Connect with customers in line and online. Shopify helps you drive store traffic with plug-and-play tools built for marketing campaigns, from TikTok to Instagram and beyond. And get hardware that fits your business. Take payments by smartphone. Transform your tablet into a point-of-sale system or use Shopify's point-of-sale Go mobile device for a battle-tested solution. Plus, Shopify's award-winning 24/7 help is there to support your success every step of the way. Do retail right with Shopify. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/bourbon, all lowercase, and go to shopify.com/bourbon to take your retail business to the next level today. Shopify.com/bourbon.
Right. And so I guess, what was some of the best advice your father gave you when you were coming into the family business?
God, there's so much. I've always admired his commitment to the community. I mean, I think if you were to look back over his 40 plus years with Maker's Mark, he's probably contributed maybe half of his total hours spent on various community projects, which again, that's been a big part of what Maker's Mark stands for since inception and since my grandparents. But that commitment to community, he lived it every single day. And that's a tremendous form of leadership. He's just been a great role model in every way, from the business side, the commitment to the community, the commitment to connecting with customers in the Maker's way, and having the thinking, it's a really counterintuitive way to market your brand. So he's been a great mentor there. And then as a father, he just lives all the values that you would ever want from a father. He's a man of integrity, and he's been great to my children. I have two, and he's been great with them.
Fantastic. So you also, there's a lot of articles that started that said you really had your first job at the distillery when you were 9 years old. Kind of talk about some of the history growing up and having various positions inside of Maker's Mark.
Well, those were I've worked every job at the distillery, and this was back in late middle school into high school, and I remember each of those days like they were just yesterday, and that helped set the foundation for me because it gives me the depth and the perspective of each and every aspect of the distillery and what Maker's Mark is. So it's
best and worst job. Best and not as best job. We'll put it that way.
I remember the most challenging physically at the time was the roller mill. We're I believe one of two distilleries in the world that uses a roller mill. And the purpose of the roller mill is to grind the grain to get to the starches without generating any heat so we don't scorch any of the grain. So it's slow and it's inefficient, but it allows us to get to the starches without scorching any of the grain. And that job requires climbing flights of steps, 4 stories up and down all day long. So that was physically a challenge, but I really enjoyed working the still. I've always marveled at the tasting panel. That's at the heart of probably the most important responsibility that we all have at the distillery is tasting panel is managing consistency of taste over time. And in the beginning, it was one man, my grandfather, and today it's 22 individuals, 15 women, 7 men, and we taste a little bit out of each batch of 19 barrels 5 times over the course of its maturation before we bottle.
So that sounds like the best job to me, the tasting panel.
Well, at 9 or 10 a.m. though, who knows?
Well, each employee within the team has an opportunity to apply to be on the tasting panel, and the application process is really no more complicated than is your palate sharp enough?
Right.
And what we uncovered over a period of years as more and more females qualified and fewer males is that the average female actually has a sharper palate. The average female has nearly twice as many taste buds per square inch on their palate. Not all females, but the average female. And I see it in the tastings that I'll conduct. Females generally can pick up the taste nuances a little bit more than the average male. But that is job number one.
Yeah, that's impressive to kind of know. So, I mean, you kind of said that you are the head of operations. So, do people look at that and they said they want to try to be on the tasting panel? Is it kind of like a promote within kind of organization?
It's a badge of honor, as you can imagine. So, everybody, all 137 employees really, really want to ultimately have that experience. But it's black and white based on quality of the palate.
Mm-hmm. So let's go ahead and we're going to touch on it, not do too much. So there was a big thing back in 2013. It was the Great Proof debacle, I guess you could call it. And just to kind of give our listeners some background for those that are getting new into bourbon and everything like that. I think there was it going from 90 to 86 proof? Is that what the big thing was? And it was because there was a huge, even in 2013, there was still a huge demand, right? Overseas markets, all these different kinds of things. And, you and your team made a decision to lower the proof. And then there was a lot of customers that were sending in either complaints or stories or whatnot, and then you decided to retract it. And now you're back to the original proof. Can you talk about that scenario a little bit?
Yeah. Over the many, many years, lots and lots of brands have made similar decisions. We did 2 things different.
Even more are doing it now. They're having to face the same thing.
We did 2 things that I don't know had ever been done before, which is before that decision was made, we actually told the whole world what we were doing and versus trying to do it in the dark of night. So we announced to the whole world what we were doing. And then most importantly, we listened. And our customers rightly raised hell. And I remember somebody asked me at that time, geez, Rob, what do you think about all of this feedback you're getting from your customers? And I said, I'm proud of them. And ultimately, it became a very easy decision inside of a week to reverse and return to 90 proof. And it's interesting because even in this country, not many brands listen to their customers. So, we owned up to the mistake, listened to our customers, and have moved on.
Mm-hmm. Would you consider that maybe the hardest decision or one of the tougher decisions?
As I just mentioned, you can't hear as loudly and as clearly what we heard. And it was a very easy decision.
Mm-hmm. So I guess let's kind of talk about that role in operations. I guess what are some of the bigger decisions that you've had to make as chief of operations?
Well, it's everything down to the distillery expansion, which we just completed. That was a 2-year project, building an identical replica of the original distillery. So today at Maker's Mark, when our friends come to see us and you're inside the distillery, it gives the illusion of looking into a mirror, which you're not. What you're actually looking into first is the second distillery we built 15 years ago, and we just finished up our third. So under roof at Maker's Mark inside the distillery, we have 3 distilleries, each of which are identical to one another. And that's allowed us to grow in a way no distillery in the world's ever grown. And same equipment, same process equals same taste. So that's a project we've been working on. We actually built the first roads in Marion County, Kentucky in 35 years. For those of you that have been to the distillery, it's
about time. We were lost on those for a bit.
Yeah. Follow the signs, not navigation, not the GPS.
Yeah.
Follow the signs. But we've just built 2 miles of new road, two parking lots and 2 bridges. But what that's done for us is take all the congestion in the parking, which used to be right in the heart of the campus, out to the perimeter. And all that asphalt's been torn up, and it's like a park. As my grandfather got started in the early 1950s, my grandmother began to think about the place. Not to offend engineers, but most distilleries are constructed and designed by engineers who focus exclusively on functionality. Thankfully, she had the vision to think of the place as the soul of the handmade bourbon that her husband had set out to create. And this is before any distillery in Kentucky had ever hosted a visitor. She thought, what more compelling way to connect with friends than to swing open your doors and let them visit, just like when you invite guests over to your home. That's a very personal way to connect with friends. So even from the beginning, she had this idea of hosting friends. And that's why at Makers, you get to walk right through the heart of each and every step of the process, whereas at a lot of other distilleries, you sort of they take you around the edge of the action because it's not safe to walk through the heart. And the vision for the campus was to recreate a Victorian village. And it was a really special moment for us as a family and a team when September 2 years ago, she became the first female ever from a distillery to be inducted into the Bourbon Hall of Fame. She, to my knowledge, is the only female ever to name a Kentucky bourbon, and she created the Maker's Mark name and bottle design, which some would say is maybe the most iconic whiskey or bottle design.
Can't argue that one.
And she was credited with inventing bourbon tourism. Fred Minnick said, in his opinion, she's the most underappreciated figure in the history of whiskey.
Well, yeah, I mean, because it's one of those things that, we just talked about at the very beginning. Bourbon tourism's exploding, right? And that was one of the things that when we learned is that, really Maker's Mark thought about tourism long before tourism even really began to really pick up. So I think it's very interesting to kind of get that little tidbit in history. We're reaching the top of the 30-minute mark. Let's talk about some life outside of bourbon just real quick. So what other kind of hobbies do you have?
I love to steal an hour on the treadmill. Or run. I'm not a very good runner. I'm nice and slow and steady, but I love to
kind of like your bourbon, right?
I love my time just to burn off the stress or the pressure on the treadmill. And I have 2 kids, so that's all consuming on weekends and everything else. So love just seeing them chase their dreams and find their passions.
You think they're going to go into the family business as well?
You know what? They're both intrigued by it, and I think they're proud, and they have a sense of appreciation for the magic of Maker's Mark, and they've spent time with me and on site at the distillery, and they're intrigued by all the uniqueness of the various elements of Maker's Mark. But we'll see. Like any parent, you just want them to chase their dream and find something that they're really passionate about.
Well, if this podcast is still going, maybe we'll get them in 10 or 20 years, right?
That's right. Our kids will be hosting.
Yeah, right. So, Rob, just want to say thank you again for coming on the show today. This was fantastic. Love the insight into Maker's Mark, the history, the brand, your position. This was just so fantastic.
Thanks for your time. Enjoyed meeting you, gentlemen. Come see us at the distillery.
Yeah, thanks again. Like I said, Maker's is one of the first premium bourbons you drink when you make your progression through, this whole bourbon chase that we go through. And so I appreciate your time. And that was great. I loved hearing the story and all the history and excited to see Makers grow and let's just keep this thing going.
Absolutely. So if you like what you hear, make sure you subscribe to us on iTunes. You can find us by just typing in the word Bourbon Pursuit, but odds are you're probably already listening to it, so you already found it. If you want to, you can follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Bourbon Pursuit. You can also like us on Facebook.
Yep, and if you have any suggestions or people you want to hear on the podcast, we listen to our customers as well. So definitely let us know, and we'll see you next time.